Okay, but like mentioned, I have the chat open on my second screen. So in case you have something during the presentation, you are free to ask. You are free to say anything you like, your thoughts. It doesn't even require a question mark at the end. If you just have some thoughts on such, be sure to drop those with a very low barrier. That would be amazing to hear it from you as well, what do you think about these and such. Because in the end, these are, especially these GameLAB lectures that you're about to hear, is more focused to you. This is not a, let's say, generic scoping and production lecture that I have in different environments. This is like handcrafted for you after the booth camp event, because I heard some things in there which I wanted to address, and because of that, this scoping and production presentation here is not a generic scoping and production presentation. It's more focused on the things that I heard during the booth camp and things like that. So scoping and production, hands-on take, how to get going. That's our intent. And now my keyboard is not there, so let's do that. So the intention for this given lecture or lesson, or what you want to call it, is that I give you thoughts how to get going with your project by actually doing it. And by actually doing it, I mean that we try to keep this as practical as possible, even though obviously I'm talking to different kind of teams, different kind of rosters of teams, different kind of projects and such. So it's almost impossible to take into account everyone's situation and such. But I still do my best within the coming lecture to do that. So for starters, I want to say that in case someone missed it, that our intention for the coming months and weeks is that we have the playable demo of our game from each team by the end of March, which means that we are moving pretty fast here. And because of that, we need to actually start building stuff already, not just be on the design table and think what we should be doing. We need to act and start doing stuff already. And I try to give you thoughts around that, how you get going and what you should take into account when starting to write your first line of codes or making that first line art for your character or whatever it is. But anyhow, the agenda for this hour, there's a lot of things, but obviously these wrap up together. But we first take a look into the word scoping, in case someone don't understand what scoping means. Because we all come from different backgrounds. For someone, it may be a totally obvious thing. For some here, it may be like, is it something about shooting a rifle and putting the scope on it? No, it's not that. So we will take a look into that. What is scoping? And what takes time and how to evaluate it? We take a look into that, and understanding team weak and strong points, which I think is a very mandatory thing to understand when starting your project. And specifying your first goal, we will have a concrete even homework for the given issue, but obviously I will also talk about it, how to specify your first goal. And the major pre-production decisions, which I want to address as well, that we should take into look in a couple of things before we even start doing anything, and that's yet again related to the homework that you will be getting. The homework deadline will be on, if I recall right, it's the end of Tuesday. So during Tuesday next week, you should deliver the homework. So hopefully you have some free slots with your team before that. Okay, so let's go forward. So what is scoping? It's basically specifying what needs to be done and how long will it take. I would maybe put that sentence for what is scoping. So the intention when we do scoping is we try to understand how big of a workload we are about to be taking here. And if you have no clue about scoping, if you have no previous experience in making games, you will most definitely fail this step. But even experienced developers out there fail this step, and I would say that most of the experienced developers fail within this step. It's an interesting discussion all the time when I talk about the scoping with people. Like, it feels like that some people say that they have very good scoping systems and they plan their projects nice and good. But I just think that it's almost impossible to scope a project. If you're able to scope a project from start to finish without any problems, you are most likely making something, let's say, not in a very creative mindset, like you are making a software or not even a software, because that's also hard to do. But especially in games, like, because we don't know the project we are gonna be working with. When we are making games, we are building something that doesn't exist, and it has so many audio things, so many visual things, mechanics and such, that we don't even realize what the game will need and require to be good, that it's impossible to design it on the table. It just needs to be done, and then you start to understand what kind of a project you are working with, and with those thoughts, you are more able to start scoping that what is actually required and what is non-mandatory for this given project. So, in a nutshell, I think that scoping is impossible. And because of that, I will also give you thoughts in this presentation, like how to approach a system that is, let's say, impossible to understand the whole picture. So how should we approach that? So most developers fail within scoping. And that's, like I mentioned, the reasons are basically that, because we are working with something that we do not understand what we are working with. Games in general are all so unique and different that it's almost impossible to try and understand the whole picture on the design table. So there are so many parts in the game development which either you forget existing or don't even know about it. And each project is somewhat unique. So if I would, let's say, join a project, it would be still impossible for me, even though I have years and years of experience, to understand that specific project, what is required for that to be good. And because of that, we need some playable, we need some understanding what the game is and how it functions and what is the fun in it, and then we can start focusing in the things that are actually important and start scoping. So each project is somewhat unique. And that's, I think, for game development, that's just a fact we need to kind of, let's say, acknowledge that we cannot do it on the design table, the whole scoping part. Because as an example, if someone says in the project team or outside of the project team that we want to add this small feature where a player can do X stuff, it may sound, when someone says that's very simple, sounds fun, maybe that could be a good thing for the game and such. But what we forget when we rush into development part is that there are so many aspects that we need to take into account when adding that small feature. As an example, maybe user interface, or most likely there is some part of user interface that needs to be modified in some way to be able to have that feature there. How we're going to be actually teaching the player to use that. If it's anyhow, let's say, differentiates from the current mechanic that the game has, we need to teach the player how to use that. And we forget that so easily as developers because we just think that this is a fun feature when the player gets the hang of it, but in the end the player doesn't even get the hang of it because it's too different or too unusual or whatever. So we don't take that into account, and the feature just complicates things for the player and the user experience suffers. There are effects that need to be done for new features, clicks, bumps, sound effects, everything that needs to be done for that small feature. Graphics, obviously, icons, characters, whatever that feature is. The code logic, obviously, that it actually functions, but also the possible conflicts with the existing mechanics, which we don't even realize when thinking of this small feature. But then when we start implementing it, we may notice that, oh shit, this is actually conflicting with this X mechanic and such, and we need to change that as well to be able to have this in. So adding new feature is always risky. Does that mean that we shouldn't add new features in the game? I think no. I think yes, we shouldn't add new features in the game during a milestone. And that's what we're going to be looking pretty soon, is what is a milestone and how do we define that. But once we have defined that what we're going to be doing within coming days, weeks, or months, we should not add anything to that scope that we have planned. Because it totally destroys the whole idea of what we have planned. And let's put it this way, that if it doesn't destroy what you have planned, you have most likely not even planned anything. So the beauty of scoping is that you actually have a very clear understanding what you're going to be doing within coming days, weeks, or months, and you then just execute that plan. And after the given plan or the execution, you can then take a look what we should be including next to the game. But during milestones and during sprint, or whatever you want to call those, is a moment then you shouldn't be adding more feature because of the things on the screen. So project gets out of hand easily. And I bet people who have made games before may relate to this, that it's easily becoming a mess. You have loads and loads of different kinds of features that are incomplete, and you just have this feeling in back of your head that this needs to be polished at some point, this needs to be made into a good quality and such, but you have such a big pile of things in the game already that you're getting overcrowded with the feeling that how much of a work we need to be doing before this is actually complete. And that happens when you're scoping games bad. In my opinion, when you scope a project, you should have only a couple of things that you make, and you need to reserve a shitload of time for polishing those couple of features, because the amount of polish in game development is something we forget all the time. But loads and loads of features that are incomplete equals poor quality game. And that's what we basically see in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases of shipped games, we see that there is potential, there is nice features and such, but none of those features are actually polished into high quality content, which basically means that the whole game just feels poor quality. So prepare to polish. It's always a good habit to start with something very small and polish that as good as possible. And while doing that, we usually learn about the game, what we're about to develop, and what we're currently developing. So I dare to say that the number one reason for games to be overscoped is because we don't reserve time for the polishing part. And polishing part is basically just that. Nicely designed UIs, nicely designed effects, audio cues, color coding for different kinds of things and such. And we just forget this. We rush into the next feature that we have on mind, that maybe this feature will make the game feel good and such. While in the end, we just have polished the existing mechanics and the player would have liked the game. But we just think that the amount of features equals a good game. And that's basically never the case. And also, good games are, in the end, very simple. If you just give you a minute or two to think about games that you have liked, or let's say that are the most played games on Steam or mobile and such, in the end, from the mechanics wise, those are very simple. Especially if you think about the game's, let's say, first 10 minutes or such, which basically determines is the player even interested in playing forward. Those first 10 minutes used to be very, very simple. There's not a lot of mechanics and such. Maybe those loads of mechanics will come later at the game, but especially for the first 10 minutes or such, we actually focus into very simple and small amount of things in the game that just needs to be very good in the quality level. But as developers, we usually think that the game requires more and more features, mechanics, and systems, while the player is still struggling to get hang of the basic systems in the design. And that happens very often. Let's say almost always it happens. Because as developers, we play that given game for hours and hours and hours, and we start to feel that these features are very simple, these features are straightforward, and we require something more for the given game to make it interesting. But that's because you have played the game for hours and hours during development, so it's clear to you, but not for the player. So we should be focusing into those simple things in the game and make those feel good and make those feel so clear for the player that he or she actually understands what the game is about and why should I be playing more than 10 minutes of it. So the best outcome for the first version, and let's say maybe for the March release that you will get, hopefully, all of the teams, I really hope that the people who play it would think that it was good, but it's missing content. And that's the best outcome for the first versions that you make of your game. Because we can add more content, that's no problem. But what we cannot do is make a game that is from the platform, it's rotten and no one likes it and no one requires it and no one wants to play it. It doesn't really require more content. We just need a new game at that position. So let's not focus into the amount of content. Let's focus into the amount of the quality that we deliver. Content can follow, but quality cannot. It needs to be from the beginning. And to make something that feels good, it requires a lot of polishing. It requires so much of polishing that we don't even understand how much of polishing does it require. But trust me in this one, the polishing part is the thing that consumes the enormous amount of time to actually make something feel good. If you think about basically most of the games like mentioned on Steam or such, like in those, like the movement and the animations and the effects and the sound cues and the color coding and everything in the game is just so top notch that it feels so good to play that given game for 10 minutes or such, and you're already hooked to see like what's happening next. And that's the feeling what we want to have with our games, is that the first minutes feel very good. But the amount of content may be lacking, but we just want that feeling that it feels good. Alexi is saying that, are you using feature and content interchangeably, or is there a difference? Feature basically means some new mechanic. Something, let's say, the player can, I don't know, shoot with a gun. That's a feature. And another feature would be that the player can pick up weapons. And another feature would be that there's an inventory system in the game. But amount of content is that how many items do you have in that inventory, or how many guns you have to shoot, and how many X things you can do with those given features. But feature is the mechanic that allows to do something, but you build content around that given feature. If that clarifies it. But what does polishing mean? In a nutshell, there's a letter code UX, which is user experience. And I think, personally, that most of the games forget the user experience part. We do know UI as an example, as a word, but we don't really understand the word UX. And UX is basically that. it's the amount of polish that you have been able to do for the game. I'd say that most of the developers, even unexperienced ones, can make a game that has features and mechanics and even content, but let's say unexperienced developers forgets the UX part and they don't focus or let's say reserve time to do the UX for the games. So most of the bugs, like usually when we say bug, we say that I could run through the wall, or I was able to throw a grenade through a wall, or the game crashed when I did this, or something like that. But I would say that the most common bug in the game is the UX bug, which basically means that something doesn't feel right. The player is finding it hard to understand what to do, and the player doesn't see the results from his or her actions, like the progress in the game. The UX is like a story that needs to be told, starting from the store page itself. We are building the expectations for the player right from the store page already. Before the player even runs the game, the player has expectations. What will I experience when I play this given game? And obviously those expectations needs to be met when the game starts. And not only met during the game, but met within the next 10 minutes after starting the game. Those expectations needs to be delivered immediately, especially in today's market. Let's say maybe years back, people actually had, let's say, they were able to focus into a game and learn it. Trial and error, press buttons, see what happens, maybe even read the manual and such. But that's not today's market anymore. People who play games, they want straightforward into the part that they don't really have to think about it or learn it that much, or at least if they feel like learning something, it's basically just scripted in the game that they feel like they're learning something, even though it was totally intentional. But it's usually the UX bugs that kill a game. Like as an example, like some very concrete example, I made the Secret Quest game a couple of months ago, and the gameplay itself, like the player would run around these levels and shoot enemies and gather resources and stuff like that. And I was so focused into the building the gameplay part of the game that I didn't bear attention for the, let's say, first minute in the game. So then I kind of played the game through a couple of times, or obviously, well, a couple of times, like hundreds of times myself. And then I released the first version of it. And then a YouTube video arrives where some influencer is playing that given game. And my God, he was not even able to get to the gameplay part before he rage quit. Because he couldn't find the button how to get to the level. I was like, it's right there, it's flashing, it's giving effects, like why don't you click that thing? And he was like struggling, like looking all over the game and trying to like understand what to do next and such. I'm like, it's flashing there like in front of you, why don't you press that button? But it's obviously, I cannot blame the player here. It was just very bad UX design to tell the player what to do next and why. And no, you cannot do that with text. No one reads those texts. It needs to be like visually showing very clearly what to do and give the reason why we are doing this and such. But you cannot tell that through text. No one reads those. Obviously, there are some genres where players are used to reading things, but most of the genres people don't. So you need to be delivering that information in some other ways, and most importantly, in a way that it would feel still for the player that he discovered the way of doing that, even though it was like intentional and scripted, that the player understood what to do next. Kalle oli saying, found already one UX bug on your buttons up game. This game was worth every penny. The bug it isn't clear that you can scroll down that build menu on the right side. Yeah, that's something I've been struggling with. Like, there's already visual indicators. There are way to drag the system. There is the mouse scroll for it and such, but people just, oh my god, realize that you can scroll it. But yeah. But these are perfect examples that you feel as the developer that it's so clear that it's done this way. But when the user who has never played the game jumps into the game, they actually have no clue. No clue. They're like babies in trying to understand how to put the cube in the right place. Like, you need to be handling the player that way. But obviously not showing the user that you think that the user is stupid, but in a way that he feels or she feels that I discovered this and I feel good because I discovered that, how this functions. Dennis is asking, is there a perfect example on how to introduce a new mechanic to a player? That highly depends on the genre, obviously, because there are some genres where, let's say, there are standard systems how you do stuff. Like as an example, if you make a top-down shooter game, you most likely want to have, let's say, the mouse that the player looks into the direction where the cursor is, and the left mouse button is for shooting and such. And you have these standards in different kind of games that you need to follow. And if you're making something different, then you need to think how you're going to introduce that given mechanic for the player. And it really depends on the game and the mechanics. So I think there's no universal answer for your question, unfortunately, in my opinion. So because of UX, we need to start building it from the beginning. Instead of adding loads of incomplete features, we focus into a couple of main features that we aim to polish. And this information should be, let's say, encouraging to you. You are not supposed to be making a shitload of features. You're supposed to be making only a couple of features that stand out, feel good, looks nice, sounds nice, are clear, and such. And this is your main focus for the coming months, is that you do that. Instead of having that piles and piles of content that no one will ever digest, you will only have a couple of minutes of gameplay with those couple of features that feel good. Which leads us to how to evaluate how long does it take to make the game complete. And I think the answer is plain simple. You don't. You don't evaluate how long does it take to make the game complete, because even you don't know when the game is complete and what is required to make that game complete. Because you learn as you go. You play test the game, you see someone playing it, and you understand that they're actually more interested in doing the things that the game was designed to, that maybe we should focus into those things more. So if we would already be evaluating how long does it take to make the game complete, we would already be addressing to the things that are totally unknown for us, like what is the interesting part in the game, what is clear for the player, what they like to do in the game, and how they like to do that and such. So in my opinion, we shouldn't even think how long does it take to make the game complete. We should take a look into one single milestone, that what we try to achieve, what kind of a game we would try to achieve within this short period of time. And with that game and that version of the game, we are more able to answer the question that how long does it make the game complete, as an example. So instead of thinking like how long does it take to make the game complete, we should cluster the development into clear and small milestones, which enables us to polish the content. And those clusters, trust me, are much, much smaller than you expect. if your, let's say, plan to make a good game is something that you already understand on the paper that this will take a year to complete, you are most likely doing something wrong. You're trying to build a game that requires so much from you that you will never be able to finish it. So instead, we should start working with the game that we actually realistically can accomplish the first fun version of the game within a couple of months or such. Obviously, still, it's missing a lot of features at that point, a lot of content and such, but the core of the game should be already fun and clear for everyone who plays it. So obviously, we need somewhat understanding what the 100% game requires. But we also need to understand that some or even most of the planned features that we want to make are not required. And we also need to be able to let go of those features that we have planned, because we need to stay agile in developing the things when we are talking about game development. Because we don't know what works, and we don't know how much of a time does it take to actually polish something into a good quality. Especially when there's a lot of people working with the game in a team and such, we don't know like what's happening within that timeline and such. So we should have only that one cluster that we're currently focusing into making a good quality game. And that one cluster is obviously very small part of the content that we want to deliver, but it still tells so many answers to so many questions what we're supposed to be doing within the coming weeks and months and such. But that's somewhat understanding what the 100% game to complete the game with 100%, we obviously need some idea that we maybe want to be doing this and that, but it still shouldn't be, let's say, determining to yourself that this game will be fun when it's complete 100%. That's just an excuse, in my opinion, because you need to be having a fun game within a very short period of time. And if you're not able to do that, you're most likely biting a so big chunk of the cake that you will never be able to deliver that with a good quality. So, agile development. By clustering the project into clear milestones, we are able to react after each one and change our priorities. So to simplify, we don't necessarily need to even know how long does it take to develop the whole project. We just need an understanding what we're aiming to achieve with this milestone that we're now starting. And that milestone should deliver a more clear game to you that is fun to play. And in my opinion, it's still an excuse to say that we just finished our milestone and the game is totally broken and it's not fun to play and no one wants to play it, and everyone who plays it only plays it for a couple of seconds or such and says that I don't know what to do, and then we tell to ourselves the lies that, well, when we work with this game for 1 year it's gonna be much more better. Most likely not, to be honest. Or if it is, you're just taking a huge risk by doing that and investing your time into a thing that don't have any clear of a, let's say, future for the development. So don't argue with the fact that if you're not able to deliver a rather good quality game within a month or two, it doesn't mean that it's ready, but it needs to be fun already and something that people want to play. If you're not able to do that, you are most likely working with the wrong project. So here's a very simple milestone. Let's say the weeks 1 and 2, so 2 weeks in total, you would work with the core feature X and core feature Y. And you wouldn't even be considering like so much of the graphics and such and the audios and such. You just do some placeholder things like some cubes and boxes and some concept graphics done fast and such within those 2 weeks. And after those 2 weeks, you would playtest that given game internally I say internally, because when you have cubes and boxes and placeholder graphics, you don't want to do that externally, because you only want people playing the game who understands the core and understands what kind of is behind all that messy looking game. And you do that analysis what it requires to feel good. And then you plan for the next 2 weeks, as an example, to polish the content within the given time limit. Whatever it is your time, within this example, it's 2 weeks again, as an example. So you would use those 2 weeks to polish the game as good as possible. So if you can do the math, I would say that you need to reserve half of the development for the polishing. So if you work with features and mechanics for 2 weeks, you need to reserve at least 2 weeks to polish the game. If you work with mechanics and such for 3 months, you need to be working with the polishing for 3 months. So that's pretty much doubles the development time, depending on how much you use to build the core features and the mechanics and the systems that the game plays. But then you need to use that same time to actually make it feel good. And within that polish round, let's call it that, is that you will not add extra features. Like, that's a rule. No extra features. You focus on the UX for the whole time, because that work never ends. Or it's not supposed to be ending at any point. There's so many things that you can do better with the UX side that it's just endless amount of work. So don't add new features when you are on the polishing part. You will have your all hands on deck to make it feel good and have the UX complete. So focus into that 100%. So what if the team is art or code heavy? In my opinion, the project should be as well. So depending on your team composition, you should plan your project that in mind. If you have a lot of talented artists, or not even talented artists, but you have artists, more artists in your team than you have programmers, as an example, you most likely want to make an art-heavy project. And obviously vice versa. Like, if you have coders more than artists, you want to make more mechanic-heavy project, not leaning too much into the graphical sides. And that's a pre-production decision as well. And this, by the way, this homework that you will get is leading a lot into this analysis of your whole team. So as an example, if you have art-heavy team, you will try to find a genre, try to find reference games and such that are with simple mechanics, and the game audiovisuals are top-notch. Those can be, like an example, like point-and-click adventure games, maybe clicker games, visual novels and such, where you can basically focus a lot into the visual side of things rather than putting the programmer or a couple of programmers to work a lot to make all the mechanics and such work. It's just the reality you are in. You cannot start planning an art-heavy project if you only have one artist and such. And in many cases, the answer is not that you just get more artists to work with that, because then obviously your team size is bigger and then you need to be selling a shitload more of copies if you release that game, pay the salaries and such. So try to keep the team small and just understand your composition, what kind of a project you should be working with, rather than forcing it to work with something that it's not even ready for. So code-heavy team, complicated mechanics with diverse systems, yet simple art style, as an example. It could be like games like RPG games, maybe it's strategy games or something like that. It's not about the graphics that you look amazing and it's very diverse on the graphical side. It's about like having a lot of complicated systems that the player has fun to discover and use those in the gameplay. But it doesn't mean that the amount of art tasks are like long. Those should be very short. So try not to start working with project that does not take into account your team composition. And this is obviously especially for indie teams and small teams that you don't even have the capacity to get a lot of more people. And even if you do, then you need to be selling a lot of copies to have the break-even situation for your project. So keep the team small and plan projects that take into account your team composition. That is one very big pre-production decision, that you are not forcing your team to work with something that you don't even have the capacity for. Which leads us to setting your first goal, aka milestone. So now we go rather concrete with the things and what you should be considering within the coming days and such. Ears up. So determine the following: your team strengths and weaknesses. Yes, you need to be also think about the weaknesses, like what we shouldn't do as a team. Maybe it's about personal interests for specific projects. Maybe it is that some artists are more familiar with this specific style, not that style, as an example. And also, what genres fit to this environment? Taking into account your strengths and weaknesses, what genres there are, as an example, on Steam, that fit to this environment. You can already tell, like if you go look, let's say, to clicker games as an example, those are, let's say, people are not expecting that appealing art style, as an example, in those specific games, in clicker games. They're used to very simple, let's say, coder graphics in clicker games, as an example. But if you go to, I don't know, visual novels as an example, people obviously expect that those have some specific nice art style and such, and you need to invest a lot of time to make those nice and such. So what genres fit to this environment, your strengths and weaknesses? And once you understand the genres that fit to this environment, you need to be doing market research from that genre. And there also may be the kind of a conclusion for the market research is that you conclude that we shouldn't be making a game for this specific genre because we are not able to hit the quality level what this genre requires. Because it's not only about graphics and the amount of mechanics and such. It's about the amount of polish, as an example, that you're expected to be doing, and the competition in that given genre and such. If you go to look, like, as an example, like I don't know, action games on Steam. What are the top-selling action games on Steam? Like, those are AAA games or something like that has taken years and years from big teams to accomplish. So it's a suicide to start working with the action game right now because you're not able to hit that quality level, what the people are expecting from those games. Or if you have action as one of your categories, then you need to be diverse and be going into some other genre as well to understand or get the audience from that genre who are not expecting, as an example, that good of an art style or such. Pano is saying that if you're not sure if we are not able to hit that quality level before trying it out, is it automatic? No. I don't know what this means, but obviously that's why we do market research. And you should be rather confident after your market research that you are able to deliver that quality. It's pretty hard to step back after that because you have invested a lot of time for it already. So you should do that homework pretty good to understand the market and understand the genre that you're taking the competition in. If you have never run a mile in your life, you shouldn't be attending the Olympics to run a marathon. What is that is missing in the specific game and what you plan to do differently? I actually skipped that. So find your reference game. Are you able to hit that quality level? And I think the easiest pick for starting your first projects as a team is that you have a very clear reference game. From that reference game, you can understand the amount of polish you need to be doing, like the effects, the UX part in general, how many different scenes there are, how the user interface is implemented and stuff like that. And you can, I hate the word copy that, but I will still use that copy because I think that is the intention for a big chunk of development is to copy some existing mechanics that you have, or let's say the UX, copy the UX from some specific games. And in top of that, you can add your own twist that you have on mind. But in the end, it's rather simple in different genres what people are expecting from those genres, what is the quality level and how those games function and such. So it's maybe even stupid to not take that as a reference and do a copy of that. Yet again, I hate the word copy, but in the end, if you look at games from any genre and you look at the top games on that given genre, those are pretty much having very much similarities to each other. Jonna is saying you can test if you can deliver that quality in a week. Make visual target best possible fake screenshot of that game. You can't be getting that. You can do better doing your project. Also mind the how many assets you need on top of that. And that's a very good point. Like fake screenshots. Like make a situation or some moment in the game that you kind of have captured a screenshot from that. And if you're able to deliver that screenshot, you are most likely able to put it alive as well. But obviously having live footage of game and having a screenshot there's a lot of, let's say, expertise that is missing. but still you're much more closer to being able to hit that quality level. So determine the following, the scope. You need to determine the core loop. And if someone don't know what is a core loop, that's pretty much in all of the games, there is a core loop. And what core loop means is that, let's say a very simple core loop, that the player is given a quest that you need to kill 5 bears. And once he has killed 5 bears, he will get another quest. And that's a very simple core loop as an example. So that could be a core loop for some, I don't know, linear game where you run around open game world or something and you get these quests and you just follow the rules, what I should be doing next and such. So that's a core loop. Or maybe the core loop is that you gather resources and you buy units with those resources, and then you go to battle with those units where you lose resources because you lose units in that battle, and then you repeat that. Then you get more resources to get more units, and then you go to battle to lose the units, and then you repeat that. So that could be a core loop. That's, by the way, the Clash of Clans core loop as an example. But anyhow, so you need to have that core loop. What's the thing that the player keeps on repeating all the time? Because that's what games are for. It's about patterns. It's about things that the player learns, that this is how the game functions. And the player actually feels good when they discover that pattern in the game that they can repeat. In many of the games, that's what people are after. They want to learn the pattern and they want to repeat that pattern. So pick 2 or 3 core features that the core loop demands and specify what those core mechanics has to include, like art, sound, music, code, whatever. And that's about scoping. Then you set your timetable, like these core features need to be ready for playtesting with placeholder or test visuals. Maybe that's your one milestone. How much you reserve time for polish, maybe double the amount, how much you use the time for the core features. That's a very good rule of thumb. Yet again, if you use 3 weeks to make those core features, you need to be using approximately 3 weeks to make the polishing part for the game. When and where the game will be playtested by real users, that's something you need to be discovering as well. The players don't just come to you. So you need to find ways to actually get real players for your game, to have that real testing environment for it, to see how clueless they are when they try to play the game. And also from which channels you acquire the playtesters as an example. And maybe you have a goal how many players you want for the playtest as an example. Because in the end, even though if you have a good game, but you haven't planned how you get the playtesters for the game, it's pretty much just dropping your product in the middle of the forest and hoping that someone finds it. So you also need to be thinking how you actually get the players for it. Mika is saying, as an indie, I'd always try to find a smaller niche rather than just try to hit a broad genre like platformer or action. No matter how awesome of a team we are not gonna match Hollow Knight. But the movement is based on deck builder roguelike mechanics, much less saturated. Yeah, that's like, yeah. It's always trying to find the middle road. If you go too niche, your market is so, let's say, small that even though if you would get like 50% of those players or such, it would still be way too less of players, which affects, as an example, the algorithm that if there's not much of a players purchasing your game or looking at your store page, the algorithm will drop you and you will not get discovered. And at the same time, if you are in a too broad of a niche, then there's too many competitors and you just get buried underneath all the games that are released. So you need to be on the middle, which obviously makes it hard and makes us to struggle, like, because there's no specific rules or recipes how you can dodge that. But that's still always the thing you need to be keeping in mind. Niche, but not too niche. So the outcome, stick to the plan until it's done. Changes should only be made after the milestone, not during it. You can obviously write these ideas down somewhere that you have for the game and such, and these awesome features and mechanics and such, obviously write these down. But once you have planned your milestone and you are on the run, you should not add more during that. Because once you are complete with the milestone, you will have a game in your hand from which everyone can learn so much. What's the interesting part and what we should be focusing into, so the features and ideas that you have during that milestone may not even be, let's say, important anymore. So always keep your eyes on the ball. And that ball means that milestone, obviously. And after the milestone, your game should have X minutes or seconds of polished gameplay. And that means polished gameplay, yet again. Not that you just argue that, well, it's rather broken still, and we still are lacking a lot of features in the game, so maybe because of that you don't like this given game. No. That's just a bad argument. Like it just doesn't work that way. You need to have polished gameplay that is nice to play, even though it only plays for a couple of seconds or minutes or such, but that part of the game needs to be super polished already, because you learn during that process how much of time it actually takes from you to polish that gameplay. So after this, you have much better understanding of the whole process, and most importantly, what your game is about and how to make it better. And also, because your game is polished, you're able to test it externally as well, because those internal tests don't really bring fruit in the long run. You need to be getting external testers who don't have game development background or even any understanding from the specific game and such. But before you can do that, you need to have a polished game that those external users can play. And that means polished game, obviously. So to wrap it all up, major pre-production decisions. Start, build a project that is in line with your team composition. That's number one. Have a healthy reference game and genre. And what healthy means is that it's niche, it's clear with the genre, and you see that it has performed pretty good on the storefront. Don't try to plan it all at once. Cluster the project and stay agile. And scope your project for the first milestone, but also understand the possible big picture you are after. But still, I keep repeating this, the big picture should not be an excuse why the game is not fun after the milestone. It's supposed to be fun after the first milestone, and it's just an excuse if you say that it will be much better once we have this and that. Most likely it will not. Set up your timetable and stick into it. Don't change the plan on the way. Go through it. You had a plan. You stick into that. You make the game into the position that you planned, and then you can think about the timeline again and such. But stick to the plan. So the coming months, we aim to get the first polished short demo complete by the end of March. And we are moving forward pretty fast, so do not hesitate to ask assistance if you feel stuck. You can send a message to me on Discord or such. Obviously, I'm not a rainmaker. If you have poop in your pants already, it will take a lot of time to clean it. So I can try my best, but the earlier you send a message, the better it is, and it's easier for adjust the things. So don't hesitate. Just drop the message and don't think too much. So this is the homework. I will put it as an image on the chat. So each of the teams should determine the following: the environment, your team's strengths and weaknesses, genres that fit to this environment, and market research from that given genre, which ends to the moment that you have a reference game and you have a rather clear understanding that we are able to hit that quality level. And what is missing in that specific game and what you plan to do differently. And the deadline for this given homework is the 27th of January, by the end of it. I guess that's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? It is Tuesday. So by the end of Tuesday, this should be documented. So that's for the presentation. Wow, it's like 6 sharp. But I didn't reserve time for the questions and such. But obviously, if you want to stay, you can stay and ask questions and thoughts. But I keep repeating this. But I'm sharing my own experiences and stuff on my Patreon. So if you want to follow that, it's for free. So patreon.com/chestercraft. Become a member there. So I write blog posts and record videos and such where I share my journey in making game each month. So I try to do my best and share all the information there. But to even have a chance to stumble upon it, become a member right now. So you get the emails and such to your inbox, so you don't forget that.